Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the second part of the audiobook series, Chapter 29. Amyntas lunged at Richard but was stopped by the pointed end of a spear. The Spartan backed off. Just then Ares entered the fray, looking as smug as ever. "My, aren't we eager," said Ares. He let out a bellowing laugh that echoed throughout the room. Symbol and Amyntas glared at him. "You're right, Richard. These new humans are idealistic. They can never see past the black and white. A pity. I hope they see the truth." "And what truth is that?" growled Symbol. "The truth, my dear, is that resisting is pointless. How many Earthlings have died trying to fulfill some forgotten prophecy? I've honestly forgotten the count. It's sad and pathetic. Richard, however, is different. He knows the reality of his place. Only the iron will of Kairos can bring true peace to this world." Amyntas hated this kind of speech. It reminded him very much, a little too much, of the Persian king Xerxes, who sang the same tune, offering peace in exchange for freedom. He then walked up to the god of war and stared directly into his face. "I've known men like you, Ares, loyal dogs to a master who prides themselves as gods in human form. I have heard of men like that, and they also from the same weakness, pride. Tell me, Lord Ares, if your master is so great, why has he found killing a few more humans so difficult? Perhaps he's not as powerful as he thinks, or maybe you're just a poor soldier." Just then, Ares grabbed the Spartan by the throat and lifted him up. Symbol tried to intervene, but was stopped by two of Ares' men. Ares looked at the Spartan with hate and venom. His hand wrapped around the young man's neck. He could easily snap it like a twig if he wanted to. He then pulled Amyntas close to his horned helm and spoke in a dark growl. "There will be no glory in your sacrifice. I will erase even the memory of the seven from the histories. Every piece of humanity shall burn. Every Chronai elder and every scribe shall have their eyes pulled out and their tongues cut from their mouths, while uttering the very name of you humans will be punishable by death. The world will never know you existed at all." Despite presenting a dark image to the human, Amyntas was not fazed. Instead, he gently gave his reply to the god of war. "The world will know that free men and women stood against a tyrant, that few stood against many, and before this war is over, even our god king can bleed." Many of Ares' men were taken aback by such a profound statement. Even Lord Ares was impressed. Even in the face of death, this one human had a backbone. His expression then changed to a sinister smile. "I like you, Spartan. You're not soft like the others." The mighty warlord then let go of Amyntas. The Spartan fell to the ground, and Symbol pushed past the soldiers to help her friend up. "You all right?" she asked. "I'm fine," replied Amyntas. "Perhaps I can ask Lord Kairos to recruit some Spartans once this is over. Now, Richard, the stone, please." As Richard entered his pouch, Amyntas saw a glimmer of the stone and realized Richard and his friends made a very poor mistake. "He's going to give him the green one," whispered Amyntas. "What do you mean?" said Symbol. "The stone. It's green." Richard grabbed the green stone, and it was the green moonstone. It was a stone they had taken from the Wendigo village. But it was not the moonstone, Richard promised to Ares. Ares' expressions turned sour as Richard presented his prize. "What is this?" said Ares. "Are you blind? It's the moonstone as promised." Ares glared at Richard. "Do not try my patience, human. That's not the moonstone. I've seen it myself, and it's not this." Richard tried to explain. "My lord, my compatriot and I took the stone from the now-deceased King Ursa. We went back to the village and transformed it into a moonstone. Amyntas can vouch for me. After all, it was his plan." Ares turned to the Spartan. "Does he speak the truth?" Amyntas looked at Ares, then at Richard, then back at the warlord. "He's right for once. Yes, I did devise a plan to attack the forest dwelling of the Wendigo. We did acquire the stone, and we did go back to the village, but there's one flaw to Richard's story. This grabbed everyone's attention. A flaw, said Ares. Richard and his friends were not with us when we returned to the village. They stayed behind. Richard cannot say this stone is the moonstone, as he was absent. Richard interjected, Don't screw with me, Spartan. The stone is a bloody moonstone. Hell, you brought back Margaret Hamilton, Archibald's wife. Why, Richard, don't you remember? Only a mage can use the stone. Yes, the spells are in Greek, but that doesn't mean I can conjure up a spell, responded Amyntas in a falsely flabbergasted manner. Richard began sweating and felt the looming stare of Lord Ares hovering over him. Is that true? Asked Ares. No, he lies. It is a moonstone. I won't lie to you. Me, a liar. Well, that's a first. You lied to us, saying that you and your friends would help us. And now here you are lying to Ares of all people, and begging to pass off this green stone as a functioning moonstone, said Amyntas. Shut up, yelled Richard. He punched a Spartan, knocking the bronze helmet off the young man's head. Blood trickled down Amyntas' mouth. He spat it on the ground and looked at him. Ares was beginning to tire of this. Enough. There's only one way to see who's telling the truth. And since we are in an arena, we shall have a martial challenge to the death. Soldiers, strip Richard and the Spartan of their armor. Leave the basics. Suddenly a handful of men surrounded the two earthlings and began removing all pieces of armor from their bodies. Richard and Amyntas were left in their nude undergarments as the soldiers moved away. Spartan wore only his red tunic and leather sandals. As for Richard, the English knight, he wore a simple white shirt, black leather pants, a belt, and some boots. With no longer restrained by their armor, Ares ordered his men to make a large circle around the humans. The symbol was pulled aside by the warlord to not interfere. Soldiers moved their shields before them and made a metal barrier, fully enclosed. Ares tossed Amyntas and Richard their weapons. Amyntas had his spear and Xiphos. Richard had his trusty two-handed bastard sword. As both sides picked up their weapons, each began planning their attacks, knowing he had to take the initiative and win this fight. Amyntas got into a traditional Greek fighting stance. He crouched, lowered his body, and held his spear over his left arm. He began to move slowly toward the English knight. Richard did the same. They were only a few feet apart. Making the first move, Amyntas thrust his spear at Richard. The knight dodged the strike, sidestepped, and countered with a downward blow. The blade barely missed any vital organs, but did leave a slash across Amyntas' right arm. The young Spartan saw Richard on his right and swung its spear at him. The spear tip cut into his shirt, giving him a slash across the belly. After understanding each other's abilities, the two finally went at it. Though Amyntas was a Spartan, and arguably one of history's most fierce warriors, one could not deny that Richard was the more experienced of the two, for he had seen many battles before he was summoned. The confrontation was intense. Both sides attacked, defended, and countered. Each received their share of cuts, bruises, slashes, and stabs. They then break off from each other to catch their breaths. Amyntas was surprised by Richard's fighting prowess. He seemed to be more dangerous than the Persian mortals. As for Richard, the English knight knew he had to end this fight quickly. Just as Amyntas charged at him, he kicked somewhere directly into the young warrior's face. The sand temporarily blinded him, allowing Richard to deliver a killing blow. Knocking the spear out of his hand, Richard thrust his sword into Amyntas' gut, causing Sybil to gasp. She tried getting up, but was held in place by Ares, eager to see how the fight would end. Richard pulled his sword out of the Spartan and saw Amyntas collapse, falling to his knees. Blood began dripping from his mouth and onto the sand. He then used the blade's tip to lift the young warrior's head. We'll give you a proper burial, said Richard in Latin. Amyntas said nothing and simply smiled with blood in his teeth. The smile threw Richard off guard. Why was he smiling? It was here that Richard forgot the most important thing about Spartans. Spartans didn't fight fair either. They fought dirty. Amyntas grabbed the sword tip and, using the last bit of his Spartan strength, broke the blade in two. Then, with his left hand, he gave Richard an uppercut and punched the English knight. Keeping momentum with his right hand, the Spartan thrust the sword into Richard's left shoulder and pulled him in to deliver a knee strike. The knee went directly into the center of Richard's face, breaking his nose. As Richard fell backwards, Amyntas soon got on top of him and repeatedly punched him. Fueled by the adrenaline, the punches echoed throughout the arena. After a while, Amyntas stopped his barrage and slowly got off his opponent, lying on the ground with Richard Hawk badly beaten and suffering severe bruising. We Spartans have a rule when it comes to fighting. We don't fight fair, and we don't stop until we know we have won, said Amyntas, panting heavily and clutching his bleeding wound. Just then, Ares clapped his hands. Impressive, Spartan. Most impressive. I could use a man like you in all ranks, a true warrior. The powerful warlord asked his men to bring Richard's body forward. 2 soldiers dragged the bloody warrior towards the war god. Ares inspected Richard and then kicked him with his metal boot. Despite the blow to his face, the English knight was still alive. Now, what to do with you all, said Ares. His men soon encircled the wounded Amyntas and Simple. You said you would let us go, said Simple. I made no such promise, human. I only asked for the truth through combat. I have my answer now. Thus I see no reason to have you alive. Like Richard, you're both worthless to me. Let him go, Redbeard, said a familiar voice. Everyone looked up at the arena seats, and to their surprise and satisfaction, there were some familiar faces. Their friends had finally arrived. Chapter 30. Let them go, Ares. I won't ask a second time, said Maury. He had his rifle directly aimed at the warlord. Ares laughed. Oh, this is a surprise. Guess I'll have the pleasure of killing you all here right now. As he boasted, the war god felt a sharp pain in his side. He turned and saw Avalon with one of the punch daggers deeply embedded in him. The young king then took the stone from the warlord's hand and placed it back in his pouch. He then removed the blade from Ares' side. The wound didn't hurt him, but did give him some discomfort. He glared menacingly at the young prince. This momentary distraction gave Tyr and Vortigern time to grab Amyntas, Simple, and Richard. With their friends safe from Ares, Avalon smirked at the war god. You've lost, Ares. We have the stone. Looks like you have another failure to your list. The young Wendigo could see Ares was furious, his eyes matching the color of his beard. Before this, Chaos considered him the most efficient of all the warlords. Now his reputation was at stake. He glared at the Wendigo and spoke with a roar. You think this is over? It's only a matter of time until my lord Chaos has killed the last mage. Once that happens, you're all stuck here and I'll have nothing more than you'll be nothing more than a sport for my hounds. Your fates are already sealed, said Ares, who was now tense in the blood-sand arena. Ares and his men now faced the Earth's champions. Everyone waited for the unexpected. Just then a scream was heard over the domain, and bodies began falling from the sky. They were Lord Ares' men, those stationed outside. One soldier looked in the air and yelled out in horror. Wyverns! He shouted. Before anyone could react, 5 massive winged beasts descended upon the crowd. Their pointed tails knocked down several soldiers, and their dangerous, flesh-ripping teeth quickly tore through the enemy armor like nothing. 3 landed on the arena floor, while the other 2 remained in the sky, causing further chaos. Tyr and the others on the ground tried to escort their friends to safety, while Mori and Kanatagona provided cover fire on the upper levels of the Colosseum, shooting their muskets and bow and arrows. However, despite their missile fire, their attacks did nothing to the Wyverns. Their armor was too tough. Watch out, said Kanatagona. He and Mori ducked as a wyvern flew over them, nearly grabbing one of them with his powerful curved talons. These are more dangerous than before, said the samurai, already loading another round, while the other champions hid in one of the entrances of the arena. Ares contended with the dragons. He swung his sword wildly in the air, hoping to hit one. Alas, not even the mighty war god could best them. Then, from behind, the eldest wyvern struck Ares in the back. She sunk her talons deep into him, pinning him to the ground. The warlord screamed in pain as her claws dug deeper into his flesh. She then lowered her head to his, allowing him to smell the noxious, poisonous fumes emanating from her mouth, her forked tongue prodding his left ear. Hello, Ares, It's been a while, she hissed. Ares grunted in agony as he tried to turn his head. Did you think your rule would last forever? Tisk, tisk. We've been watching your king for some time now, and it seems your reign is ending. A perfect opportunity for my lord to invade and reclaim what is his. Her harmful fumes made Ares choke. As he spoke, he gagged and coughed at the same time, barely getting his words out. Reclaim what's yours? This is our planet's serpent, our shadow planets. I think it's this world. She merely chuckled at his retort. You stupid fool. We create these shadows. We allow you and your kind to simply exist in this world. And now it seems your purpose here is no longer required. She purred as she moved her head closer to his. He could almost taste her breath. Soon her massive jaws began to open, and before he could act, he heard one last word from her. Lord Jawzhar gives his regards. Before Ares could attack or defend himself, the other's wyvern clammed her jaws down his head. She then twisted it off with such force and in such awkward places that it snapped with ease. His head torn clean off and gulped in one swoop, metal and all. She licked her lips, tasting the blood to savor the flavor. Then her keen eyes locked on her next targets. With a piercing screech, she called for her brothers and sisters. They soon landed next to her, awaiting instructions. Tyr and Vorkir tended to Richard and Amyntas' wounds. Damn, Amyntas, you nearly killed him, said Tyr. That was my intent, said the Spartan. He grunted as Tyr wrapped a bandage around his stomach. As for Richard, the Englishman was starting to recover consciousness after the brutal beating. He could only see from one eye at the moment, as the other was swollen shut. And as he slowly woke up, he turned his head slowly and looked at Amyntas, struggling to speak. You got lucky, he finally managed to say. The Spartan glared at him. You're lucky to still be breathing, you traitor, said Amyntas. Just then, Avalon and the others arrived. We need to leave, said Morty. What are those things, said Simple. No time to explain. Right now we need to get out of here. As Morty and Kanatagona helped Richard up, the heroes exited the arena. Once outside the Colosseum, they only had 5 of their 7 mounts, including Decimus' horse. That meant the heroes would have to share a ride. They quickly paired up the groups. Tyr would go with Symbol, Mori and Kanatagona, Amyntas, Richard, Avalon and Vorkir, and finally Decimus. The old Roman heard screeching sounds coming from the Colosseum atop his horse. Then, looking to the sky, he saw the creatures' silhouettes taking flight. We need a ride now! Bucking his horse, he and the others made a mad dash back to the forest. As he ran through the desert, just above them the wyverns stalked with their prey, the eldest still locked on her target. Her next victims were the wounded, Amyntas and Richard. She ordered her brothers and sisters to conduct mock attacks on the heroes, hoping to split the wounded from the rest of the group. The wyverns swooped down and antagonized the heroes one by one. The humans swung their weapons at the pursuers, hoping to ward them away, but it only made them more persistent. Then, over the horizon, a large cloud of dust approached them. It was a sandstorm, but unlike the ones on Earth, these sandstorms would burn skin. Seeing no alternative, Decimus yelled out an order. Ride into the storm and we'll lose them there. With the monsters close on their trail, the heroes rode into the storm with their pursuers close behind. Inside the burning sands, the sensation was worse than expected. Everyone felt their skins begin to peel off, but they kept going still. Far in the rear, Amyntas and Richard began to struggle to keep up. Their weak state was proving a challenge for them. Realizing their end was near, Amyntas knew they had to take shelter. He saw an outline of what looked like to be 2 rocks. He steered his mount and motioned the creature towards it. Getting closer, he noticed that this rock was the shelter he had taken when he arrived not too long ago. Once inside, he helped himself off the mount and placed his gear next to the rock. He then allowed Richard to get down from the beast and set him on the opposite side. Now free from the storm, Amyntas went to tend to his wounds, and saw all the burnt skin off his body. As he tended to himself, he looked outside. Hearing the roar of the storm, he hoped his friends made out safely, and that they would come back to save them. And with that, viewers and listeners, we will be stopping here. We are nearing the end, and now a new question has arisen. Who are these Wyverns? And who is Lord Jawzhar? Well, I will see you all in the next episode. Thank you all so much for joining me for a late night audiobook reading. This is the Wandering Scribe on the Wandering Quill, signing out. Wishing you all a wonderful evening. And also, a quick little update. The Audio Maze application to join the team has been fixed and updated. If you are interested in joining the team, you can now add a sample of your work, whether that is a link to your portfolio or a PDF or document, whether it's a sample story, sample audio, anything you would like to showcase us. Well, until then, have a wonderful evening.